if you start tracing down the history of the Abrahamic gods, then you'll find that the first recorded war in the history of mankind is in the Rig Veda, and that is the Dasharaj Yuddha. Then the Sanatan Dharmis won and kept their territory, and the Zoroastrians who went outside. They went to Persia. They also populated other areas, the Hittites and Menanis and all that, Mitannis and all that. And that is where the first monotheistic concept actually takes root. The Abrahamic religions have actually borrowed it from them. Sanatan Ishwar is what we call is based in the transcendent, and it actually uh, comes out of what we call Brahma or universe. That is, Brahma loosely it can be translated as universal consciousness. And when we talk of universal consciousness, then you have to relate it to the laws of physics, where you have the uh, energy and matter. So the topic is important, and I think it is more important for the Sanatan Dharmis than for the Abrahamics, because the followers of the Abrahamic religions are fixed in their ways. So they are not looking for any enlightenment. But the problem is mainly with the Sanatan Dharmis, because they are not able to distinguish between the expansive and universal concept of Ishwar or Brahma that they have from the Western oblique Middle Eastern gods that the Abrahamic religions throw up. So that is a huge problem, and therefore my talk is basically oriented towards uh, clarifying a few things to the Sanatan Dharmis themselves. And to start with, uh, as you initially said, that okay, there's the Sanatan Dharma, the Sanatan Ishwar or Brahma, and you have the Abrahamic gods. And if you start tracing down the history of the Abrahamic gods, then you'll find that the first recorded war in the history of mankind is in the Rig Veda, and that is the Dasharaj Yuddha. The Dasharaj Yuddha actually happened between two competing philosophical systems, and those philosophical systems were basically the universal and the universal consciousness, or what some people call monism, and we can use it for the ease of explaining it to the people who are basically educated from the Western lens. Uh, and there was this the Zoroastrian idea, that monotheism, where they wanted to have. They said that okay, we have that one deity, and that is what they called Ahur Mazda. And then the Sanatan Dharmis won and kept their territory, and the Zoroastrians who went outside. They went to Persia. They also populated other areas, the Hittites and Menanis and all that, Mitannis and all that. And that is where the first monotheistic concept actually takes root. The Abrahamic religions have actually borrowed it from them, and they have made it even more dogmatic, because in Zoroastrianism there was some room for your own karma, or your own effort, your own endeavor towards realization. So you had what is called an intermediate heaven and hell, and then you had what is called finite time over there, and from the That is the basic difference between the cosmology of the infinite in the Sanatan system or the Indian system, and the limited cosmology of the Zoroastrians, because their cosmology is about 10,000 years. And in those 10,000 years, you have what is called the soul moving to these intermediate hells and heavens and coming down and reincarnating for a while till it goes into an eternal hell or heaven. Now, that was modified by the Abrahamic religions into one life and eternal hell and heaven. So you can actually trace it from where it is coming from. And basically, it relates to different psychic levels, as I've been saying. That it's funny that the Abrahamic gods are supposed to be nirakar, but full of guna. That, okay, they are formless, but full of attributes. So that was the basic, very, very basic elementary difference that I had made out. And this is the historical context to that as well. The Sanatan Ishwar is what we call is based in the transcendent, and it actually uh, comes out of what we call Brahma or universe. That is Brahma. Loosely, it can be translated as universal consciousness. And when we talk of universal consciousness, then you have to relate it to the laws of physics, where you have the uh, energy and matter, and then you look at the philosophies like Sankhya, which give you the elementary interaction between consciousness and matter, and thereby producing the different gunas or attributes. And that is why, every time that you talk of liberation, that liberation means going beyond all attributes. So it becomes the Ishwar or the Brahma. It becomes formless. It becomes attributeless. And even if it is sagun, even if you go into the sagun, even then it is transcendent in the sense that it does not distinguish. That even Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, he says that samoham sarva bhuteshu name dveshyosti na priya. Either this or samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishthantam parameshwaram vinashyatsu avinashyantam yah pashyati sa pashyati. I'm taking these elementary examples from Bhagavad Gita, and they can be actually applied both to the Nirguna as well as to Saguna. Actually, there isn't really too much of a difference between Nirguna and Saguna. That is, I can cite Ramcharitmanas and Tulsidas ji. I think it is one of the greatest samanvayakari between the Saguna and Nirguna. And says that Aguna hi Saguna hi nahi kachu veda, gavahi muni purana buddha veda. अगुण अरूप अलख अज जोई भगत प्रेम बस सगुन सोई. So it is the bhakt that produces the form with his bhakti, and that is where that first shlok that I said, samoham sarva bhuteshu name deshyosti na priya. So, but he says that, okay, with a bhakt, that if there is a bhakt and who especially looks after the Lord, then he also looks after him. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu, sorry, samoham sarva bhuteshu name dveshyosti na priya. And ये भजन्ति तो माम भक्त्या मयि ते तेषु चाप्यहम. ये भजन्ति तो माम भक्त्या, जो भक्ति से मेरा भजन करते हैं, मैं भी उनका भजन करता हूं. You understand? This is cause and effect. So that is the concept of Brahma concept of whether you look at it in the Advaita form or you look at it in the Dvaita form. In all these things, you will find that there is a transcendental concept. There is a transcendental being. You call it a being. If you want to call it a being, then you call it a transcendental being. And it resides at the highest level. Then you try and levelize it, and then you relate it to the different levels, different psychic levels as well. That also can be done. But you compare it with the Abrahamic God. The Abrahamic God, first of all, Abrahamic God is very prescriptive. In all Sanatan concepts, you will find the description of Brahma, okay, in whatever way. Okay, that is, I'll take another example. This is again from Ramcharitmanas, the Rudrashtakam, where he is Tulsidas ji is looking at Shiva as the Parabrahma. Now, this is also the beauty of this. You can look at the Parabrahma in various forms. Even Parabrahma can be looked at in various forms. So Shiva as Parabrahma. Then he describes Shiva as Parabrahma. He is actually doing a Rudrashtakam. So he says, Namami Shamishan Nirvana Rupam. Okay, Nirvana Rupam. Namami Shamishan Nirvana Rupam Vibhum Vyapakam Brahma Vedas Swarupam. So please concentrate on this, Vibhum Vyapakam. That is omnipresent. Vibhum Vyapakam Brahma Vedas Swarupam. You know him as the form of the Brahma. So this is Shiva in the form of Brahma. Then the best description comes. That is always gives me goosebumps whenever I look at the description. Nijam, that is within. Nijam Nirgulam, without form. Nijam Nirgunam Nirvikalpam. Nirvikalpam, non-dual. Nijam Nirgunam Nirvikalpam Niriham, that is no ego, it's beyond ego. The Nijam Nirgunam Nirvikalpam Niriham Chidakasham Akasha. That is, you have the four psychic levels. The four psychic levels are Mana, Buddhi, Ahankara, Chitta. So Chitta is the highest of self-consciousness, and Chitta, and then Chit. That is Ta Vidahalant. Chit is the universal consciousness. So Chit plus Akash, that is the Sandhi. So Chit Akash is Chidakash. So Chidakasham Akash, Chidakasham Akash, Chidakasham Akash Vasam Bhajeyam. So just look at this expansive concept. I think this is one of the best descriptions that I have come across. Of course, there is no dearth of writings on this. You can have Bhagavad Gita, you can have Brahma Sutras, you can have Upanishads. That's in Keno Upanishad. There are simple questions being asked: what is Brahma? What is Brahma? And then you have description. Brahma is not what you see through the eyes, but Brahma is by what the eyes see, or Brahma is not what you hear, but Brahma is by what you hear. These are the kind of questions being answered. In any case, Upanishads are answers to the question. So the beautiful things about Sanatana Dharma is that it's all about inquiry, and because it is about inquiry, so it is quasi-science in that sense, because ultimately science is all about asking questions. And therefore, you're allowed to not only ask questions, but then you get the answers, and those answers are descriptive, they're not prescriptive. A lot of people make a mistake of reading Bhagavad Gita and reading Upanishads and think that these are prescriptions. They're not prescriptions. There's nothing in Sanatan that is prescriptive. Even Smritis, when they are codifying the what is called the behavior of those particular times, their own particular times, even they are actually describing them. They're not prescriptive. A lot of people say Manusmriti says this, Manusmriti says that. What does it say? It is only describing the extant behavior. And then in the end, in the last chapter, I think 13th chapter, there they even give the rules of amending these smritis. That is, and this is not one smriti, there are so many of them anyway. I'm digressing a little bit. So, this is what is the concept of universal consciousness, a very expansive and at the highest level, at the transcendental level, at the level of chit and chit. That is where the Brahma or the Sanatan one Ishwar resides. Ishavasya sarvam yat kinchi jagatyam jagat. And that also is infinite. Purnamadaha purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate purnasya purnamadaya purnamevavashishyate. So that is the level of Ishwar. If it is formless, then it is also attributeless. Now, contrast it with the Christian and Islamic gods. Okay, so the Judaic God is also the same because the Old Testament is common to both Christianity and Judaism. Now look at that. That they say. So of course, by the descriptions or whatever they say, okay, that let's look at the Islamic God. He's sitting there on a large plank, तख्त पे बैठा हुआ है Allah. और अब अगर तख्त पे बैठा हुआ है, so obviously it is not formless. But even then, let's for the argument's sake, we take their argument that their God or Allah is formless. Fair enough. But what kind of formlessness is this? That formless but full of attributes. Every attribute, especially all the negative attributes that are actually considered to be bad even for human beings, what we are called dashari, that is the 10 enemies. काम क्रोध मोद मोह काम क्रोध लोभ मोह मद मात्सर्य अहंकार amanavta, all these 10 attributes, all of these you can find. I'm not saying without basis. If you look at the Quran, then all the time you are told, be very afraid. Allah gets angry. Allah is full of krodh. So you have to fear Allah. It's Sanatan Dharma also, a lot of people who do not have this basic understanding. अरे भाई ईश्वर से डरो. अरे ईश्वर से डरने का यहाँ कोई कॉन्सेप्ट नहीं है. किसी तरह की अवधारणा ईश्वर से डरने की नहीं है. ईश्वर को मित्र बना सकते हो, ईश्वर को अपने पास रख सकते हो, ईश्वर को अपना बेटा बना सकते हो, ईश्वर को अपना आराध्य भी बना सकते हो, अपना मित्र भी बना सकते हो, अपना प्रेमी भी बना सकते हो. सब कुछ बना सकते हो आप ईश्वर को. ईश्वर को आप जिस भी फॉर्म में देखना चाहो उसमें आप देख सकते हो. डरने की यहाँ कोई आवश्यकता नहीं. डरने का कोई कहीं किसी तरह का कोई कॉन्सेप्ट ही नहीं. But there you have to be very, very afraid. At the same time, it says that all the time it is being emphasized that Allah is compassionate and all-knowing. So compassionate. Why is this being emphasized again and again and again? Because if you look within the ayats and within the surahs, surah and ayah as they call it in Arabic, then the description is actually frightening. If you do this, then you go to hell. If you do this, then God will get angry. If you do this, then God will punish you. If you do this, then... So, same ditto in the Bible. And with that, you form this idea that, okay, it's a very, very vengeful and very, very jealous God that is looking at you. He has done the creation. This is also this, the basic differences. I'll just come to it when you ask me the next point. That time I'll also describe the basic differences, the other elemental differences. But beyond that, I'm talking about this forms and attributes. This form and attribute business is very, very intriguing indeed. And that is why I say that the God of Abrahamics is a God of intellect, because all these attributes, the 10 attributes that I talked about, the Dashari, they all arise from your ego and intellect. Once you go beyond them, then there is no question of those attributes. In fact, that is what it is. Nijam, Nirgunam, Nirvikalpam, Niriham. When you're going beyond them, then everything vanishes. But here, everything exists because this God is a God of your intellect and ego. That is the one fundamental difference that I was talking about. Mentioned Tulsi Das ji, that how Nirguna becomes Sagun. And in that sense, he is uh, much more complete, because he is looking at the psychic levels of all the people. He recognizes the diversities that are inherent among human beings. And we all know that there are some people in whom the emotional quotient will be higher. In some people, the intellectual quotient will be higher. There are some people who are able to go beyond, there are some people who are not able to go beyond. So he's catering to everybody. Unlike, say, somebody like Kabir, who emphasizes in the Nirguna Ram, Ram Niranjana Nyarare. So that is, he's talking about Ram Niranjan, that is without spot. So that is, he's talking about Nirguna Ram. And as far as Tulsidas is concerned, his Ram is both Sagun and Nirgun. So, in that sense, that is why Tulsidas became the rage, because he reconciled the two. And throughout Ramcharitmanas, it is supposed to be a story of Ram, but especially in Balakand and Uttarkand, in these two kandas, you will find this description, this full of philosophical discussions about Sagun and Nirgun. So that is what basic reconciliation, that is where it comes about. And that also relates to, that you have to understand the basic differences again. That I have differentiated the, other than the character of their Ishvara, their God, otherwise also there are 7 classifications in which I have differentiated the Abrahamic religions and the Bharatiya Dharma. And that is common to Sanatan Dharma and all its offshoots, whatever you can call it, the Dharmic path or Dharmic traditions, if you want to take a more general term. So, in Dharmic traditions, what happens? What are the, number one, the attitude to inquiry, what I call science, so attitude to science or quasi science. So, that is what, because here you are encouraged. What are the scientific methods? The scientific methods is verifiability, universality, repeatability, and falsifiability. All these 4 are available to you. And if you look at the Shaddarshanas, then you can very clearly see that all the Shaddarshanas, in fact, if you go very strictly, then you will find that at least 5 of the 6 Shaddarshanas actually, you can very easily characterize them as atheistic. Atheistic in the sense of the Western idiom, not exactly in terms of the Indian idiom, because the Indian idiom, the Nastika position is actually an epistemic position. Epistemic means concerning the proof. I'll come to that. So that is the first one. The second one, of course, is the time concept. The time concepts, the Indian time concepts, the Dharmic time concept is cyclic or quasi-cyclic, where you move around in a cycle, but it is a quasi-cycle in the sense that it is not eternal recurrence. That is, in the Western, the Greek world, of course, it was sometimes treated as eternal recurrence. I have written a monograph. It is there on my Medium blog also, and it is there on my Jaipur Dialogues blog also. So one can have a look there. I've explained it, and I and Dr. C.K. Raju, we've had long discussions on it, and I wrote it, and he has vetted it also. So that post-cyclic time in which you can go out of the cycle, that is what is called liberation. That is, you can leave that cycle. Then in the Abrahamic world, it is absolutely linear, not just linear, it is super linear. That is, the time has a beginning, time has an end, and that also is compressed to a few thousand years. The Zoroastrians were the first one to compress it, then they said it is 10,000 years. And Christians, of course, they brought it to something like 6,000 years. In fact, it was much less. They go on increasing it every time. The last date they had given, that was given by Newton, it was 1920. Then they said 2020, but it doesn't seem to be coming because their cosmology is completely off. Both their cosmology and their sense of linear time is completely off. In fact, that is good enough to falsify their entire theory, all the Abrahamic theories, because the linear time has been falsified. So if the linear time has been falsified, all religions based on linear time should automatically get falsified. But nobody looks at it that way, that detail. Third is, of course, our what is called this logic. The Indian logic is never two-way. The Abrahamic logic is always binary. And that again is based on what epistemology? Epistemology means the proof system. That their proof is the proof of the book. Whatever is in the book is correct, and whatever is not in the book is wrong, true and false. And that true and false depends on the word. Whereas in Indian system, what happens is that Pratyaksha Praman is the highest Praman. So much so that in Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan Krishna says that if you have experienced the Ishwar, then you do not even need the Vedas. That is where even Arya Samaj fails actually, because Arya Samaj insists that Vedas are the Praman, ultimate Praman. But here in Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan says, यावा अनर्थे उत्पाने संपतः संप्रतोदके तावान सर्वेषु वेदेषु ब्राह्मणस्य विजानतः. That is, for a person who has experienced the Ishwar, it is something like somebody who is sitting on the bank of a huge reservoir and the kind of use that person will have for a small pond. So that is that is the kind of epistemic freedom that has been given to us. So that is epistemology. Then cosmology. We know our cosmology infinite. The first, I think, the very first enunciation of infinity is in that shloka that I said right in the beginning. That what is that? Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamadachite. That is actually infinity verse. Then we come to the eschatology. Eschatology is the death theory. Our death theory is all about liberation, and the death theory it is linked, of course, to the cyclical time, and the death theory of the Abrahamics is linked to, of course, to the linear time. So it has one life and eternal hell or heaven, and that eternal hell or heaven actually provides that fear of God, because uh, you are not autonomous in that sense, because a Sanatani is autonomous in the sense that he can produce his own fate, whereas the Abrahamic is totally dependent upon the will of his Allah or his God. And of course, the last one, that also you can call it a derivative, but I treat it as a seventh classification, is the immanence of divine. That in the Abrahamic God is always outside the cosmos. He sits outside the cosmos. The Sanatani, the Ishwar, because, and if you relate it to everything, the universal consciousness, the Chit, and all that, that the divine is immanent. Even in the Dvaita philosophy, is immanent in that sense. So, quite often I tend to think that philosophy that came much later, it has very much in common with the Wahadate Wajood of the uh, Islamic philosophy. So sometimes I get this feeling that maybe it is a reaction to that. Of course, I haven't done any great research on that. That just loud thinking. So now you try and relate. I've given you the first the expansive and universal, the subconscious, universal consciousness of Brahma, along with these seven differentiation. So you know that the Abrahamic God is actually a prescriptive, constricting God who basically is a product of the intellect of somebody, the prophets maybe. It's not like in Sanatana Dharma, where you have an inquiry like the Nasadiya Sukta in the Rig Veda. I think most of us would know Nasadiya Sukta, and we know that what kind of inquiry it is, and it leaves it open-ended for you to determine. So that is what I think is the larger differentiation.
The conversion tactics that are used by these Christian missionaries, and it has been done since many centuries now, where they kind of try to fool the people by saying that the Advaita philosophy and the monotheistic principle is common in Christianity and Sanatan Dharma, and the Vedas also prescribe this Nirgun God. So they try to confuse this and try to tell them that we are the same thing, and then you should, हमें अपना लेना चाहिए क्योंकि हम exactly वही है जो वेदों में लिखा है, वो सबसे पुराना है. So people kind of get confused and get fooled and say that okay, maybe the same thing, So let us. What's the difference? So I would like you to probably give a counter if somebody puts this across.
No, I gave you 7 different classifications for you to come to them. What is your logic concept? What is the importance of the book? We don't have. We are based on multi-valued logic. We are not based on the logic of the book. All these are counters. Those 7 points that I've given you, all of them are counters. And also, let us look at something like uh, how it operates at different levels. They have only one level. They reduce everybody to the level of ego and intellect. That is their level. Whereas Sanatana Dharma gives you different options at different levels. The psychic levels, okay? Yes, we have this para, pashyanti, madhyama, vakari. Or if you move in a different context, then you have chitta, ahankar, buddhi, man. And for all of these, you have a different approach. The many path approach is basically an approach that is not just through what is called, they're confused by, monotheistic and polytheistic. Now, I gave this to you right in the beginning that monism and monotheism are different. And what is this one God? That there is one God. When they say there is one God, they don't mean that actually. God is one is not their prescription. The prescription is my one God. You have to differentiate between God is one and my one God. For them, it is that my one God, which sits at the level of, not at the level of para or the transcendence, but at the level of the next level, the Pashyanti level. The Pashyanti is at the most, you can say, high ego level. In any case, in Western psychology, they removed para. Though when the Western psychologists, Freud and all, they were discussing this, they looked at the Indian psychology and they looked at the level of para, but then the church, because they had to take permission from the church told them not to touch that. Because as soon as you go into para, the authority of church goes away. Then you start direct communication. Direct communication will mean that the authority of the church goes away. In Islam, authority of the cleric goes away. So they have forbidden that fourth level. That fourth level you cannot talk about. As I said, immanence of the divine is not permitted. Anybody is telling you, if a Christian tells you that, okay, they are monotheistic, first of all, ask him, number one, what is the difference between monism and monotheism? At 99 out of 100, they will not be able to tell. Of course, they are taught apologia. That is their specialized course in apologia, how to defend Christianity. Everybody who becomes a pastor has to necessarily go through those courses. So these are the different psychic levels, and those psychic levels, according to that, if you are at the level of manas, then you can go for bhakti yoga. If your level of the intellect and ego, then you can go for jnana yoga. You can use your intellect to transcend your senses, or you can go for the samadhi yoga or the raja yoga. If you're at a higher level, you can use that, or you can use that to go to that higher level. After all, Patanjali yoga is probably the best technology to transcend all your senses and to go to the highest level. That is the one that even prescribes the it says your yogaschit vritti nirodha. And what are the vrittis? It surprises many people. In fact, the first time I came across, I was also taken aback that pramana viparye vikalpa nidra smratya. So even nidra and smriti are supposed to be vritti. You have to go even beyond them. So the Christians, they tell you lies. And because most people are not well schooled, that is why I said that my talk is basically aimed towards the Sanatan Dharmis. And it is encapsulated in that little booklet which I mentioned to you, that you can have. In fact, I will probably send you a link which you can give to the people, and also you put it in that YouTube talk that ultimately will be brought out. So these are the basic questions that you need to ask, and you need to ask them that what is the permission, or what is the uh, let's say, I'm looking for the right word. What is the mandate for inquiry in Christianity? There's no inquiry. It's pure dogma. Can you question the existence of Jesus, for instance? Can you question virgin birth, for instance? Can you question flat earth, for instance? You cannot. So when that happens, when you're not allowed to question, when whatever is there, the word is God. In fact, it is there. I think in John, the Gospel of John says the word is God. The word means the scripture of Bible. So the Bible is God, the word is God. Then there is no room for any inquiry. There is no room for any reflection. There is no room for any transcendence. There is no room for going beyond. They, in fact, they put a barrier in front of you. Jesus is the barrier. You can't go beyond Jesus. So those are the points on which you can very easily counter them. In fact, I am I've been waiting, so many people, they don't even come and argue.
Good evening, Sanjay sir. My question is that the concept of Shivalingam has been interpreted so badly, particularly by the so-called mythologists like Devadatta Patnaik, that it becomes particularly critical and embarrassing for a non-Sanatani to understand it, also for a Sanatani to explain it. So, how do we ourselves understand and interpret the concept of Shivalingam to our non-Hindu friends who ask us about it?
Actually, it is a question of bad translation. That lingam is translated as phallus by the Westerners, whereas lingam is basically form. And the Shiva and Shakti form is what is Shiva Lingam. So it is the form of Shiva. It is not the phallus. That basic problem of translation is something that is used against you. And of course, you took the name of Devadatta Patnaik. Devadatta Patnaik is the what is called the first-rate sepoy of the Westerners. You know his guru Wendy Doniger. He's a disciple of Wendy Doniger. So you do not expect a disciple of Wendy Doniger to actually talk sense. Let me say, in Sanskrit, there is Pulling, Striling, Napunsak Ling. What is Ling in this? Ling is gender. There is a form. The male form, the female form, and the neuter form. Of course, Sanskrit is one of probably the only language that I know which has a neuter form as well. So you are conceptualizing the form of Shiva in a Saguna manner. You can also conceptualize it in the manner that I described in the Rudrashtakam. That it is bad translation of a Sanskrit term into English. I would recommend to you the latest book that has been written by Rajiv Malhotra ji, the Sanskrit non-translatable. So this lingam is another non-translatable, which a bad translation has resulted in this kind of a confusion.
Very important series of questions which relate to the same theme. So you said Samoham Sarvabhuteshu Name Dvesho Sinapriya. That means God is non-partial. If a real devotee of that one true God, if he prays in Israel or like say in Pakistan or in say West Indies, can that one true God, can he reveal himself to that the devotee? Very true. I mean, possible, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Samoham Sarva Bhuteshu Name Dvesho Sinapriya just
So,
means that. And it's not a question of revelation, it's a question of realization.
correct.
Anybody can realize him. It's the concept is realization, not revelation. Revelation is a very, very Abrahamic term.
So is there a possibility that the God who revealed himself to Moses on Mount Sinai, who himself called as Ehe Asher Ehe, which is Jehovah, which got later translated into Jehovah, and all those things, which literally mean I am that I am, right? And the other one who is like the god of Zoroaster, right? Which he called as Ahura Mazda. When he revealed himself, he told his name as I am, that is Ahmi Yad Ahmi, which again meant I am that I am. And in the God of Vedas, the God of Veda reveals himself as Ahamasmi, literally again meaning I am that I am. So this is the connection between all the revelations, which is documented clearly in all those religions, which literally points to the same God revealing himself everywhere.
No, I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you because as far as the Ishvara is concerned, Ishvara is to be realized, not to be revealed. He doesn't go around revealing himself. You have to go and find him. It is a seeking. It is not a belief. Whereas when you say that he revealed, this man revealed himself here and that man revealed himself there, that is basically a dogma. Here you have to seek him, you have to find him, you have to realize him within yourself. And a revealing God is one who's sitting outside the cosmos, who's not sitting within you. You're not even permitted to realize within you. The concept of, when I was mentioning about the different levels, then we have this concept of what we call Upadan, Nimitt, Devata, and Manushya.
Yeah.
So these are again related to different psychic levels.
Correct.
So when I say the para level, that Upadan, and Upadan is the Brahma. Then you come down to what is called Nimitta. And so Nimitta is where that is the level of the deity. That is why I say that the Abrahamic God is at the level of the Nimitta, or at the level of the intellect. So Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, they are treated as your Ishta, or they are treated as your Nimitta. And what are Devatas? Devatas are within your brain. Devatas are your different cognition points. So when these people, they start saying that, okay, that we do not share our deity with anybody. So this is actually a deity. This is not even a god. Look at the confusion. First of all, they strike out the universal consciousness part. They reduce their god to a deity. And then they start comparing them with our deities, which are nothing but the manifestations of the highest consciousness. So therefore, I do not agree with this comparison. Revelation and realization are fundamentally different. One is immanent and the other is outside.
So, I mean, like the interesting part here is whatever entity which revealed itself to the god to Zarathustra or Moses, and the one which the one which comes in the Vedas, it comes with the same name called Ahamasmi, which is more important, which literally means I am that I am. And the true meaning of I am that I am is the Antaryami. That is the more interesting part here, which cannot be what do you say, collated with the Abrahamic cults, what do you say, ideology, because it's the God within me. That's the most important realization that you have to have.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, because even in the Vedas, the way to understand Vedas, actually I refer you to an article by Professor Subhash Kak. And there he discusses the first Rigveda Sutra, that is Om Agni Mile Purohitam Yagyasya Devam Ritvajam Hotaram Rattadhatamam. And then he compares the translations that have been done by the Westerners and even some Easterners who are prone to look at things in the Western lens. And then he looks at it from the point of view of the realized soul. Because for the realized soul, Agni is not fire. Agni is something else. How many types of Agnis are there in the Vedas? How many types of Agnis are there in the Sanskrit language? Dozens. So Agni, is Agni the physical fire? That is the basic question that you need to ask when you start going about interpreting this verse. So I think I would refer you to that particular article which is there. It is on Vedas, the different cognition points, where he discusses that the devatas are the different cognition points within your brain. And therefore, the way you're trying to compare the two, I think that is fundamentally problematic. It is, according to me, an artificial attempt. And it is actually coming from the Western lens. Because some of the people, some of our own Indian people, they try and look at it and rationalize it in this way, and then say that, okay, all religions are the same. No, all religions are not the same. Let me assert it. They're fundamentally different in every way.
I completely agree that part. What I'm trying to say is like if that is the name of the God, that can only be completely what do you say वो अर्थपूर्ण होता है सिर्फ सनातन धर्म में. That's what I'm trying to say. So the real name of God, if it is I am that I am or Asher Aher, that is only meaningful with the God of the Vedas and nothing else. And their entire cult will fall apart. ये अर्थ को पूर्ण करने में वो सक्षम नहीं रहते हैं. That's the point.
हाँ, आप बात सही कह रहे हैं, वो बिल्कुल सक्षम नहीं है. और जो कुछ भी जैसे आपके क्रिश्चियंस तो इसमें माहिर हैं, they do it very well, and they come up with all kind of these what is called false analogies. They do it all the time.
And how many souls are there in the Abrahamic cults? Like, is this finite or infinite?
According to Abrahamic religions, according to my understanding, a human being is the only being that has a soul.
Okay, like
all other beings are without soul.
So
that is why it is permissible to consume everything.
Yeah,
in nature. It is not like I recited that shloka to you. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram. So when it is said sarveshu bhuteshu, that means all beings, all sentient beings, all insentient beings, all are included. Aham atma gudakesha sarvabhutashaya sthita. So who are these sarvabhutashaya sthita? Sarvabhutashaya is all beings. Everything has element of Ishwar or universal consciousness in them. That is how you are able to have the manifestation of the universal consciousness even in a stone by consecrating it.
Completely.
That is the fundamental philosophy behind Murti Puja.
So Sarvasya Chaham Hridisannivishtaha and also Yantra Rudena Mayaya. Agree.
Yeah, it's Srimad Bhagavatam. You know, what does he say? I actually conflate these two shlokas. Let's say, Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram vinashyatsu avinashyantam yah pashyati sa pashyati. Okay? But is it possible for everybody to realize this? It is not. We know that this realization is probably the most difficult thing. 0.00001% of the people would probably go to that realization. But the realization is not intellectualizing it. It is not, mugging it up and reciting that shloka and again. Realization is a real realization within yourself. So, in Srimad Bhagavatam, in the same context, what does Bhagavan say? He said, Yavat sarveshu bhuteshu. Now, please listen to this carefully. Yavat sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhavo nopajayate. मद भावो, that my भाव, जब तक सभी भूतों में तुमको मेरा भाव नहीं आ जाता है, till you start seeing me in every being, यावत् सर्वेषु भूतेषु मद भावो नोपजायते तावदेव मुपासीत वांग मनः काय वृत्तिभिः. But till that time you keep worshipping me mansa vacha karmana. That is the fundamental of Murti Puja. So that is where, okay, that is we can agree on that.
So just a follow-up there, like, so if the souls are finite, like only humans are finite there, and when the earth perishes sometime, then what will that Abrahamic cult's God do?
There's no explanation. In any case, I do not consider it to be very scientific or rational. It's all dogma, unsubstantiated and unverifiable, non-universal, non-repeatable. In short, I think we do not use these terms out of respect, or I shouldn't say out of respect, because I do not respect anybody who doesn't respect me. And Islam and Christianity do not respect me, so I don't respect them either. I'm very clear about it. I've written so many times in my social media exchanges. But this is balderdash. Nonsense. I mean, even through intellect, you cannot understand this. Basically, what they say, Even though the God is the creation of this intellect, the Abrahamic God, but he is not susceptible even to basic intellect. That is the problem. So again, I agree with you on that.
My first question is, you must have heard Mr. Jay Lakhani. I of his videos, and a couple of things I really liked, and I would want your views on it. In one of the forums where they were discussing, where is God, which is superior, monotheistic, polytheistic, and he said something which says Sanatan Dharma is monotheistic with polymorphistic way of practice, which means you can see God in anything, but there is an ultimate existence. And so after that, what I have seen is that people, especially Sanatanis, are often confused whether Sanatan Dharma is polytheistic, which means there is one existence but various ways to find it, or is it polymorphistic to say that you can see in anything, or is it to say that this language, it is deficient, it cannot define this dharma, and hence higher consciousness, as you talked about it.
See, I heard Jay Lakhani speak, and he makes a lot of sense. But the only problem happens because he is speaking to a Western audience. So the language in which he chooses to explain it to them, that can confuse us. Basically, when he says monotheistic, well, it is not monotheistic, because theism basically means worship of somebody. So that is theism. In fact, this is accepted position that monism and monotheism are different principles. Monism is one when there is one, you can call it substance, element, consciousness, energy, whatever. That is, there is one underlying everything else. So that is not monotheism, that is monism. That is why in this talk I have tried to differentiate the levels. So Jay Lakhani, basically what he wants to say, that there is one and there are manifestations. And what the Abrahamics do is that they compare their deity with the manifestations. The choice of words may not be exactly the choice of words that we are using, but whatever he is saying is basically saying the same thing. But since he's talking to Western audiences, then he uses different terms. But we can always clarify it with our own understanding.
Thank you for the explanation. I think I also need to do a little bit study to understand this. My second question is that have you ever done any study to understand that if we trace back, do you think we'll be able to find the root of Zoroastrianism in Sanatan Dharma, especially when we look at the way they worship fire, Surya, and a lot of people say that before Murti Pujan came into Sanatan Dharma, and if you compare it with the way Zoroastrians worship, there are some or many similarities. Now, I probably would not know much about it. Any study that you have done with this regard?
Well, I haven't done so much into it. A lot of people, other people have done it. That you can look at in fact, some of these Aryan invasion theory research, and also look at the research of somebody like Shrikant Talageri, or you can look at somebody like David Frawley, and you can very clearly see that the Zoroastrianism is actually has very much common with the late Rigvedic civilization. And the late Rigvedic civilization is the one where that 10-king war is described. And the 10-king war is actually the schism that ultimately took place. And now people are increasingly coming to the conclusion that even that 10-king war was basically because of the monism versus monotheism dichotomy that occurred at that time. And a lot of other studies. There is a recent book which has come from Dr. Shiva Shastri. There also he discusses a Western language, and it is again from the linguistic point of view. And then he goes deeper into it and discusses the Zoroastrian religion as well. So I think those are the points. In fact, the Aryan invasion theory, linguistics, the Indic or the Dharmic lens, that will give you a lot of insights into the Zoroastrian religion and the commonalities.
मेरा जैसे एक सवाल ये था, जैसे आपने ये बोला कि एब्राहमिक और नॉन एब्राहमिक का, लेकिन वो एक बहुत ही मेजर चर्चा है। जैसे उसमें अगर आप देखेंगे कि एब्राहमिक में बहुत लिमिटेड है, वो आप ऐसे कंपेयर कर सकते हैं इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है और एक यूएसए का कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है, तो उसको समझना इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को बहुत मुश्किल है, कुछ ही लोग समझ पाएंगे। और मतलब रॉकेट साइंस मुझे देखा है कि बहुत ज्यादा है कि कोई आप सांख्य दर्शन पढ़ लो, ये पढ़ लो, वो पढ़ लो, वहां पढ़ लो, अब वहां पे एक बुक पढ़ लो, आपका सब काम हो गया, आपको स्वर्ग भी मिल जाएगा, आपको सब मिल जाएगा। तो वो भी मेरे को एक लगता है कि एक बहुत बड़ा फेलियर रहता है हमारा कि हम एक्सप्लेन नहीं कर पाते अच्छे से।
एक्सप्लेन नहीं कर पाते तो आपकी कमजोरी है, क्योंकि स्वामी चिन्मयानंद से किसी ने पूछा था ये कहा कि भाई वो कहते हैं कि हमारी एक बुक है, वो बुक आप पढ़ते नहीं है, आपको पता नहीं चलता उस बुक में है क्या, मूर्खता की बातें अधिकतर। तो वो कहते हैं कि हमारी एक किताब है, वो कहते हैं वो हमारी दूसरी किताब है। तो स्वामी चिन्मयानंद कहता है कि मैं कहता हूँ वेलकम टू माय लाइब्रेरी। तो इफ यू हैव access to a library, is it your good fortune or misfortune? अब अगर आपके पास लाइब्रेरी है और उस लाइब्रेरी पे आप जाते नहीं हैं, बाहर ही बैठे रहते हैं, तो उसमें उसकी किसकी गलती है? लाइब्रेरी की गलती तो नहीं है।
मतलब मैं इससे एक और सवाल था, जैसे हमारे इधर भी साईं बाबा हैं, ये सब हैं, तो जैसे कि बहुत सारे लोग इनको प्रूव कर सके कि ये पूरी तरह से गलत है, लेकिन फिर भी लोग इनको बहुत ज्यादा बिलीव करते हैं। तो और इनका एब्राहमिक से भी ज्यादा रिलेशन, मतलब जो उनकी किताब है वो थोड़ा बहुत है, लेकिन उतना भी मुझे नहीं दिखता। तो आप उस पर भी कृपया करके वो बताएं।
मुझे तो समझ में नहीं आता है कि एक तरफ तो हम ये कहते रहते हैं कि भाई घर वापसी कराओ, घर वापसी कराओ, और यहाँ पर अगर हम ये मान भी लें, चलिए हम एक बात को फॉर आर्ग्यूमेंट से कि भाई वो कभी मुस्लिम धर्म के थे, तो यदि उनकी मूर्ति बन गई तो उनकी तो घर वापसी हो गई ना, समस्या क्या है? ये फिर क्यों ये बात में आती है कि एक तरफ तो कहते हैं कि साहब सबकी घर वापसी करो, दूसरी तरफ जिनकी मूर्ति पूजा हो रही है वो कम से कम अब्राहमियों से तो अलग हो गए ना, मसीही धर्मों के लिए वो स्वीकार्य रहे नहीं, और वहां किसी को आपत्ति नहीं हो रही उनकी मूर्ति पूजा में, तो समस्या क्या है? हमारे यहाँ तो डेटी तो हर स्तर की बन जाती है, ग्राम देवता भी होता है, कुल देवता भी होता है, इष्ट देवता भी होता है। तो अगर कोई साईं बाबा की अगर अपना इष्ट देवता मान भी लेता है, so you can treat him as a कुल देवता, you can treat him as a ग्राम देवता, you can treat him as anything। प्रॉब्लम क्या है? समस्या क्या है? मुझे आज तक समझ में नहीं आया। जो लोग कहते हैं कि साहब की साईं बाबा जो थे वो मुसलमान थे, रहे होंगे, जब उन्होंने हिंदू रीति रिवाज से कुछ भी करना आरंभ कर दिया तो वो तो मुशरिक हो गए भाई। हमें इस्लाम का बेसिक नहीं पता है, ऐसा व्यक्ति तो इस्लाम के लिए हराम है। जो व्यक्ति इस्लाम के लिए हराम है उसको हम कह रहे हैं नहीं साहब हम उसको नहीं स्वीकार करेंगे। क्यों नहीं करेंगे भाई?
There is this very famous kind of a theory that is floating, that there is that Shiva resides in Makkah. There was originally a Shiv Mandir there, and it's turned into a Makkah Medina. So could you please shed some light on that? And also the abandoned temples that we have in these Islamic countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, what exactly is the use of them lying there abandoned? What can be done about it?
Point number one, I do not have any evidence to either prove it or to disprove it. But now there is increasing evidence that what we know as Mecca actually did not exist in the 7th century. So that question is a very, very open question. basically we can say that let us be agnostic about it and wait for more evidence to come. That is as far as the first question is concerned. The second one, that temples are lying abandoned, what can be done about it? Well, we can't do anything without involving those other countries. And when there is no population left, then what can you do with the temples except for preserving them as some kind of a curio pieces or museum pieces? I think there used to be about a lakh and a half people in Afghanistan till about 20 years back. Now I think they're not even 1,000. And even those little 1,000 are just in a few places. And every time you go there, you run the risk of being bombed. So you have to look at the actual situation that is prevailing there. But in Pakistan, of course, there's still quite a few happening places. Look at the Shakti Peeth of Hinglaj Mata, that is protected by the Baloch themselves, and they consider it the pride, and they call it Nani Ka Mandir, Hinglaj Mata Shakti Peeth. That is well protected and well visited even today. So, well, but Islam is Islam. They will destroy. They are fanatic about destroying all forms. And that destroying all forms actually then goes to the other extreme of destroying all human form too.
हमने जैसे विष्णु पुराण में पढ़ा है कि जैसे उसी टाइम विष्णु पुराण में प्रहलाद के जो पापा थे, उनका नाम याद नहीं आ रहा अभी, तो उनने भी यही बोला था कि मैं भगवान हूँ, मेरी ही पूजा करो। तो हमने देखा क्या कि प्रहलाद ने ही उनका भांडा खोल दिया था। तो इस्लाम का भांडा कौन खोलेगा?
हम और आप?
I am working at Cosmology Vedas. Is that international questions comes from Nobel laureates and other people also. So what is required is India has got to get organized, and it has an advantage. But then you have to look at the dimensional aspect of it. So there is not simply from biological frame. You have to work it out to divine frame. There are a number of ways which can be projected through PowerPoints. So it cannot be a dry philosophy. Through the PowerPoints, people can understand how to go beyond the galactic plane, and what we consider dharma is beyond the galactic plane. So naturally, we have to define in terms of this present day crisis. Orientation is more essential, and there are a number of books and projections. Okay, I can help you to train the people also. Then projections will be helpful. You can keep a set of the books. 15 books are there available at Lulu, and out of that, 5 books are there global, including Avatar. So what is required is copyrights and protection aspect from India is very much lacking behind, and support is not coming in the right way. Lot of universities and other people have got to wake up to the present day reality. Consciousness holds the key for entire India, and this is the base of knowledge-based culture. And because Mars Nebula filters the mind over the continents, so naturally we are seeing it a lot of chaotic state. So it is time that we have to get organized the subject in a dimensional way. The projections go in a large scale, light years. Thank you very much for giving me time.
In a very general way, I just have to agree with you.
Can't the Quran be challenged for its violent verses, including the Bible, in India today? And has it been done? And why do we not see anything happening on that front?
Well, it has to be done by somebody. It was done by, I think, you read that Calcutta Quran petition by Sitaram Goyalji. It will give you a full description of what was done in Calcutta in 1984, I think 1984, 85, around that time. And ultimately, it also got some favorable remarks from one of the judges. But then, point is that what we are doing these days in discussing the Quran and discussing its verses and actually telling our people and making them read it and understand it, that is probably much more effective. I have seen this bear fruit over the last 5-6 years, where people have now gathered much greater understanding, and there are some very fine books that have come about. One of them is this Understanding Muhammad by Ali Sina, which is actually the rage these days, and I would recommend everybody to read it. आप भी पढ़िए, हिंदी में भी है देवांशु जी, उसको आप पढ़ लेंगे और अगर 1000 लोगों को पढ़वा देंगे, फ्रीली डाउनलोडेबल है, तो ये जो आप कह रहे हैं ना बैन कर दीजिए, वो कर दीजिए, उसकी कोई जरूरत ही नहीं पड़ेगी. लोग अपने आप दिमाग से ही उसको बैन कर देंगे, और बैन नहीं करेंगे बल्कि उसको इतना प्रचारित कर देंगे कि आप सोचिए कि क्या हश्र होगा. इसीलिए अली सीना को ढूंढ रहे हैं बुरी तरह से, कौन है ये, दिस इज अ सूडोनिम. उस व्यक्ति ने पूरा का पूरा वो डिमोलिश कर दिया. वी आर डूइंग अ साइको एनालिसिस ऑफ द प्रॉफिट ऑफ इस्लाम. तो ये, और किसी चीज को बैन करने से, आजकल के युग में बैन होने से हो क्या जाएगा? आई डोंट अंडरस्टैंड व्हाई दिस फेटिश फॉर बैनिंग थिंग्स. आप बैन कर देंगे तो इंटरनेट पे उसको आप कैसे रोकेंगे? ये 30 साल पहले, 40 साल पहले ठीक था, बैन कर देते तो लोगों को उपलब्ध नहीं होती. अब क्या करेंगे आप? So I mean, there are arguments both ways.
So all this fanatism of religion or cult happens for the final fruit, which is salvation. So accept, like say, forget about the 72 who's. So वो स्थिति और गति Quran or Christianity or maybe Vedas में, like because it's an infinite passage of time, right? Once they go into salvation, तद्गत्वा पुनर्नवर्तन्ते तद्धाम परमं मम, वहाँ जाके infinite time तक क्या करेगा जीव?
I suggest you read my discussion with Dr. C.K. Raju in that book, which that little booklet actually, it's about 6,000, 7,000 words, where we have discussed this concept of liberation from his point of view, from the point of, in fact, 3 points of view. The 3 points of view are what is called eternal recurrence, the quasi-cyclical time, and what is called the reincarnation. So all these 3 points have been taken up in that, and because this merits a very detailed discussion, I think it would not be possible to do it in this kind of a discussion.
What is your opinion on Sanatani Muslims that we get to hear nowadays?
I don't understand the concept. You can't be Sanatani as Muslim at the same time. Because if you're a Muslim and you say you're a Sanatani, then you become a mushrik. And you commit the ultimate sin of irtidad. Irtidad is apostasy. So the apostasy is wajibul qatl in Islam. That is, it is mandated to every Muslim to kill that person. It's a kind of a general commandment to the entire Muslim population to kill that person. So whether you have become an irtidad or you are not an irtidad, then how can you be Sanatani? Because I already differentiated the two on 7 different points and also at different psychic levels. That differentiation I have done. So how can you reconcile that? First of all, either you're a believer or you're an open-minded person. If you're not a believer, then you're not a Muslim. If you're an open-minded person, you become a mushrik. Or you become a murtad or mulhid. So these are the fine Islamic terms that distinguish such people. So that is why I asked a few people, please explain what you mean by Sanatani Muslims. I think this confusion is there among some what is called nationalistic organizations also. I keep asking them, they haven't yet explained it to me. So if somebody else, or the person who's asking question can explain it to me, I would be enlightened.
Sanjay ji, before we end the session, yesterday you had a very, very enlightening session on the Jaipur dialogues with Neeraj Attri ji and Tufail ji on the ex-Muslims. Can you just enlighten the audience as to how to take these YouTube channels and whether to take them seriously or not?
What I said was basically that unless a person has done some deeper research or developed some understanding of Sanatan Dharma, and if he is making some comments only from his standpoint of how he looks at the Abrahamic religions, and then he becomes an atheist, and then he is into this trope of the tribe of all religions are the same, and then he starts looking at Sanatana Dharma as also another religion just like the Islam and Christianity. Then I said that okay, he's just being foolhardy. That's what my conclusion was. And so if you are going to those channels, then this is what you have to look out for. Whether this person is basically only anti-Islam, or he's just trying to act as anti-Islam and his target is something else. So those are the things that you have to be very, very discerning about. That's what I was saying.